I very carefully made sure that I wouldn't say the word DAB, and I think I said it once by accident. Because I think that actually the future, as I've said time and time again, is a hybrid one. I think that you need broadcast radio. There's nothing wrong with FM. I'm sorry to say that. There's nothing wrong with FM. As long as you have an FM license, there's nothing wrong with it. It's great. It works great. Fantastic. If you don't have an FM license, and you'll hear from Matt Deegan, who runs a DAB, an online station, later on, then actually you can do a really good job with DAB and online to add additional choice to audiences. And at the end of the day, audiences want additional choice. The fundamental thing is that the internet is just another way of getting an audio signal to somebody. If we were to switch off FM and DAB tomorrow, then every single radio broadcaster in this room would go bankrupt, because you wouldn't be able to afford your bandwidth fees, and your audience wouldn't be able to afford the bandwidth either, particularly in car, where it actually just doesn't work as a mass market entertainment medium. So you do need to focus on where the future of radio consumption is going to be, and I believe that broadcast will still be the predominant way. It's currently around 89% or so, the predominant way of tuning into radio, certainly in my lifetime. And I don't see the internet being as big a change as doubtless many people in this room do, and certainly as the Minister does. In terms of DAB, don't do DAB. That would be a silly thing. Do DAB+, because that's where Europe is moving to, and that's where, if we were doing it again, the UK would move to add additional choices and additional services from the brands that you already own and operate. Hugely important to be there, but don't believe that the future is purely going to be internet based, because I don't believe it is.
I'm interested in asking you, Helen, about how you've found, I suppose you're uniquely qualified in terms of the perspective of working for RTE and working independently. You know, when we speak about, as independent broadcasters, about public service and support for public service broadcasting and all that, what's your take on that?
Well, we obviously actually make a lot of programmes through Sound and Vision, and in some ways Sound and Vision goes back to 2003 as a legislative initiative, and it's had a profound impact, I believe, for the positive, and you can actually substantiate that in research. I think in some ways the ability for that, I mean, at the weekend the Celtic Media Awards were just over on Friday, Saturday, so in a sense for us, one of our team, we picked up a Celtic Media Award for a documentary which went out on News Talk, made through Sound and Vision. And I think that's the impact of what's been happening in terms of the independent sector, both in radio and television, and the ability to actually make very different content across a lot of different forms, using, in this case, 7% of the licence fee. And clearly, again, what the Minister was saying to us on the programme a couple of weeks ago was that he sees that as the vehicle by which he wants to see further investment in independent broadcasting and independent content. And obviously Sound and Vision is not perfect, and your points about it not covering lots of different forms of content is part of the discussion, and obviously there's elements of live programming where there can be very difficult matches. But its impact in radio has been very profound, because there really was no independent radio sector before, in terms of production, independent radio production, before Sound and Vision. And it still is very weak, it still is very fragile, because there's very little money going into it except for what Sound and Vision generates, and it's quite vulnerable.
Okay. Ian, I was interested in something you actually surfed over quite quickly in your presentation, but about Jack FM, with the most popular or most awarded local radio station, and your catalogue of awards is impressive. But you mentioned, I thought I heard you say you do one live show per day. Can you tell us, or did you say that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really interesting question. I mean, as a traditional programmer, we've always been taught, and I guess wherever I've worked before, there's been a massive lineup of stars who get paid particularly good money, depending on what markets they're in, whether they're working for the public broadcaster or for a private broadcaster. The Jack FM model is quite interesting, because it took a very long time for me to sort of understand that we were going to operate this new business with only one live show per day, and that's between 6 and 9 in the morning. And then we have 21 hours of the rest of the day, which is fairly music intensive. But the investment has been put into the creative writers that put the content between the songs. So rather than me paying a presenter 25,000 euros a year to say, that is, this was, coming up next, which is what, you know, radio has done traditionally for the last many, many years, we have writers talking about topical issues, current affairs, humour, very self-deprecating, and we redeploy all the resources into other elements of the radio station to contact the community on that social engagement level. And, you know, 2 years ago, I spent 12 months convincing the MOD that we needed to send our breakfast show to Afghanistan, because Oxfordshire is surrounded by military bases, and every single serviceman and woman who goes into theatre either in Iraq or Afghanistan leaves from Oxford. So it goes back to what Helen was talking about. We're all in the business of storytelling, and the best way to tell those stories is by getting our presenters into the action. And I was asking the MOD not to send one person, but to send 4. And that had never been done before. So I think it's all those sort of things that you do on those social engagement levels. We had a newsreader who had terminal breast cancer, and we knew that she had left the BBC because she was told that she had to leave because she was towards the end of her life. And after 3 years of not being dead, she came and knocked on our door and said, I'm still alive, and I've heard this brand new local radio station, and I want to be a newsreader. So we hired her. But what we asked her to do was to tell her story about living with breast cancer. And they're the sort of things that you can do more effectively to connect with the audience than just having a presenter telling the time.
So you've kind of reimagined the role of presenter. I mean, we often have discussions over the whole presenter versus DJ. I heard you've referred to writers more regularly in your presentation than presenters.
Yeah, I mean, we
can
have...
you describe your staff structure?
Yeah, we have a total head count of 13 people across the 2 radio stations. All of those people have to wear 5 different hats because, you know, I believe that, you know, I might pay them a little bit more than they would get in a market of the size of Oxford, which is about just under 1 million. TSA, it's 750,000. But we have 5 different writers who contribute to the content every week. We do 5 production sessions a week. And I know that if there's anyone in the room from RCS who supply our playout system, they have said to me that we probably are the only radio station in the world who does so much production. But you need to keep updating it to be fresh, to be engaging. And for me, that's why working with this brand is so effective.
Okay, thanks very much. Any questions, observations? No?
Can I license the Jack brand in Ireland, Ian?
If you'd like to do that, James, absolutely. But I think, Scott, your point on DAB was very, very interesting. We have just launched the first DAB multiplex in the UK for 8 years. We did that in December. And we took the view that having dual transmission costs would cripple our business. You know, FM transmission is our biggest cost on our P&L. We decided we needed to be on DAB simply because the DAB penetration of radio sets in Oxford was the 3rd highest in all of the United Kingdom. But we took the view that we wanted to own part of the multiplex. So I've got a very, very interesting dynamic at the moment. I have my radio station Jack FM on the DAB multiplex in Oxford, but I've got the BBC paying me a fee, and I've got my biggest commercial competitor, Global Radio, who are operating 3 new services into Oxford, all paying me a rental fee, and that sort of negates the argument, I think, a little bit.
And it doesn't work with music radio, it's a landlord-tenant relationship.
I think it's, you know, I know that Matt Deegan's going to be talking a bit later on from Folder Media, who they own several multiplexes around the UK, and I know that Matt spoke to me last night about a new initiative he's got for monetising, DAB spectrum space. But for me, I've seen a real increase in inbound inquiries for revenue, because the fact that we've actually grown the coverage area quite significantly, and we've got to a patch of Oxford which we were never able to get to with our FM signal, and we're now seeing revenue coming from that particular part of North Oxfordshire. So it's actually working well for us.